If you're somebody that's been struggling with low energy, poor mood, and even going through bouts of symptoms of anxiety or depression, then becoming more mindful of your consumption will likely hold a lot of the answers to the problems that you're looking for. And so I want to talk about this with two things in mind, because I don't want to just focus on consumption, meaning just what we're ingesting through our mouths, but everything that we're consuming with our eyes and ears as well. And so our diets consist more than just the food that we eat. It's all the things that we're watching on TV or scrolling through social media, and they're all are going to have an effect on not only our brain, but our body and vice versa. And I'll go into more details about the nutrition shortly and referencing some of the concepts that I got from this book, This Is Your Brain on Food, by the author Naidoo, and I hope I said her name correctly. But before getting into the nutritional factors, I want to start off by talking about something that's a little bit more insidious over time. Because the beauty of technology, it can be somewhat of a blessing and a curse. Because with social media, the algorithm has become very good at giving us the things that we show interest in. And so a lot of the times, things that are confrontational or have some negative component to it are things that catch our attention a whole lot more. And so by clicking on something that has a little bit of conflict in it or is a little bit provocative, we watch that once, and then now all of a sudden our feed is going to include more of those things and even things that are more like them. And I've fallen into this trap many times myself, where without me being overly aware and doing my best to counteract those clicks that I did in the past, it's easy to fall into that trap of day after day, watching the same kind of videos because they're attention grabbing, and then realizing these don't make me feel good, even though they're entertaining to watch. And then I really have to be aware of the fact that I need to stop clicking on those things. And I have to tell myself and essentially even pre-plan for that as well, especially when it comes to short form content. And I notice this myself with YouTube shorts specifically, especially when I'm scrolling, because you can be scrolling and then the one thing that catches your attention, you stop on it, and then it notices you're watching more of those things. So you don't have any control over the next thing that comes up and then the next thing that comes up, to where the more times you stop the scroll on things that are negative, then the more likely there are negative things to pop up in the scroll, which again, we have no control over unless we are becoming much more mindful of what we're stopping on and not stopping on the negative more than the positive, which can be tough. But again, with awareness, we can use that to our advantage to pre-plan as much as we can. And so this is important because tying this back together with what I mentioned before about our consumption not only being everything that we ingest through our mouths, but also through our eyes and ears, is because the gut-brain connection is a very closely related information processing system between all the nerves in our gut and GI system and our brain and spinal cord. And so it's a two-way street of information crossing one to the other. And so in this case, it's a top-down connection where all the stresses that we have psychologically will have an effect on our gut and the microbiome. And here's where the main point of the book that I referenced earlier comes into play. Because everything that we consume through our diet and through food is now either feeding the good bacteria or feeding the bad bacteria, which is our microbiome in the gut. And the bacteria in our gut is what gives rise to neurotransmitters, and especially the positive neurotransmitters that we often hear about when it comes to antidepressant or anti-anxiety medications, which are SSRIs, which stand for selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Now, over 90% of the serotonin found in our body is in our gut. Same thing with the receptors for serotonin. The vast majority are found in our gut, and even other positive neurotransmitters like dopamine are derived from our gut bacteria. And so whenever we have stressful events psychologically, that is having a negative effect on our microbiome. So the bad bacteria or rather the good bacteria and the bad bacteria are having an effect based on this psychological stress. And so the ratio of the two is important, because the more good bacteria that we have that are healthy means we're giving rise to more of these positive neurotransmitters. And so they're affected from psychological stress, just as they're affected by a poor diet. And so without getting too deep into the weeds on the food choices and dietary recommendations in this book, because she goes through different diagnoses ranging from OCD, anxiety, depression, all these other things, and breaks down each chapter and provides some different recipes and food choices that you can implement into your diet to specifically address those diagnoses. And so it's an interesting book because this author is not only a medical doctor, but she is trained in culinary arts, as well as having some background in education in nutrition as well, which is a really interesting combination for this topic. And so again, that's why I find it important to not only be mindful of your consumption with technology, or even the books that we're reading, or even the social atmospheres that we're around, and having how much of an effect that's having on us emotionally and psychologically, but also through the food that we're eating and how is that nourishing our body, because we want to be aware of not only the top-down approach that I've been referencing, but a bottom-up approach as well, which is focusing on gut health and proper nutrition. And so to make it as simple as possible, the more we eat from the earth and from animals, and the less we eat out of a box and from fast food, the more we're creating a positive microbiome of good bacteria in our stomach, which then gives rise to these positive neurotransmitters that's going to have more of a stabilizing effect on our mood, energy, and overall outlook in life. And so in further videos, I can discuss a little bit more in depth some of the nutritional components with more specific foods in the future. But until then, I hope this information and this advice is helpful. If there are things that I could add in future videos or on this topic as well, I'd like to hear from that. And so if you've made it this far, thank you for watching the video. I really appreciate it. And if there's anything that you'd like to ask me specifically, you can email me in the description. And until then, otherwise, I'll see you in the next video.